What's up, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. I'm going to read Dreamland by Sam Quinones today. I believe this is chapter 27. It's page 145. It's called What's OxyContin? Portsmouth, Ohio. One Friday, shortly before Christmas in 1997, a reporter from the Portsmouth Daily Times called Ed Hughes. Hughes ran the counseling center, Portsmouth's lone addiction treatment clinic. The reporter asked if he could come to the staff's party to write a story about staying sober over the holidays. Hughes agreed. The reporter interviewed some of the staff, asking especially about the younger clients. Midway through the party, the reporter took Hughes aside. What's OxyContin? Hughes hadn't heard of it. Some of your clients say they're using it. The next Monday, Hughes began calling around. His staff told him the drug had started showing up recently, that it contained a large amount of OxyContin, and that users had learned to crush it and snort it. He called colleagues at treatment centers in northern Ohio, describing what Portsmouth was seeing. No one in Cleveland, Akron, Columbus, or Cincinnati knew anything about OxyContin. Had Hughes made calls to the rest of Appalachia, he would have heard a far different story, one that resembled what was just getting started in Portsmouth. But at the time, he said, we didn't realize that we were essentially on the cutting edge of a crisis. Around that time, Karen Charles and her husband Jerry were making plans to move their flooring shop into a building on Biggs Lane in South Shore, Kentucky, across the river from Portsmouth. The Charleses knew that a doctor named David Proctor had a practice at the beige metal building next door. In the months after relocating, they saw his business was a lot larger than they'd figured. The traffic, in fact, kept growing. It seemed like no other doctor's practice that they knew. Proctor's waiting room could no longer accommodate the crowds. Proctor's Clinic often stayed open well past its posted business hours. People parked along Little Biggs Lane all day long waiting to see him. They'd eat 2 meals in their cars, said Karen. Many patients were from other counties, even other states. Karen Charles remembers Missouri and Arkansas license plates. Unsavory folks, most of them. They blocked access to the Charles flooring parking lot. A fight once erupted between Proctor clients and a truck driver blocked from making a delivery. On another occasion, someone called in a bomb threat and police evacuated the clinic, along with the Charles' flooring shop and nearby houses. Karen Charles never dared enter the Proctor Clinic, but she heard he was selling OxyContin. It changed everything around here, she said years later. It was something else, something I hope to never be around again. I talked to him a few times. I don't know how he expected us to run a business. Little old ladies are not going to come into a store with such riffraff hanging around. A reporter from the Portsmouth Daily Times eventually wrote a very different story from the one that ran after the Christmas party. The story talked about a new trend in addiction in southern Ohio and neighboring states. Opiates, primarily oxycodone, delivered most prominently in that new pill called OxyContin. About a week after the second story ran, Ed Hughes received a telephone call from a lawyer representing Purdue Pharma. The caller threatened to sue the counseling center if Hughes ever said in print that OxyContin was addictive. That startled Hughes, who wasn't quoted as saying that OxyContin was addictive. The counseling center was mentioned in the Daily Times story, but it was the young clients who said they were addicted to the drug. He wondered how the company, based in Connecticut, had spotted the story in this tiny newspaper. Something big was going on, he said. How did they know that the article showed up in the Portsmouth Daily Times unless they were tracking that kind of information? The counseling center that Hughes ran had began in a small house 17 years earlier. Hughes, a recovering alcoholic, felt rehabilitation really involved rebuilding an enslaved person. He believed recovery was possible only with a multidisciplinary approach to treating the addict. A continuum of care, Hughes said. An addict in treatment needed a 12-step program, but he also needed help finding housing, with writing a resume, with finding childcare and clothes for job interviews. These services had to be close by. Addicts usually had no car, no driver's license, and no gas money. Hughes had seen people go back to drugs because they hadn't been able to get a court date or an appointment with a doctor or a probation officer. By the late 90s, the counseling center had moved into a large new building for outpatients. It also had a small house for men and the only rehab residence in Ohio for female addicts with children. The center had room for all the alcoholics and cocaine users who came to it. About the time of that Christmas party in 1997, Hughes figured he would spend the next year consolidating and improving the center's internal workings, rather than expanding to meet the area's need. That had been accomplished, he thought. Not even close. Portsmouth was about to become ground zero of an almost viral explosion of opiate use and abuse. By the spring of '98, oxy addicts were everywhere, mostly young and white. It was like a wildfire, Hughes remembered. This drug scourge had a different origin from others that he had seen. In Portsmouth, it began with what came to be called pill mills, a business model invented in town, but growing from the aggressive nationwide prescribing of opiates, particularly oxy. A pill mill was a pain management clinic staffed by a doctor with little more than a prescription pad. A pill mill became a virtual ATM for dope, as the doctor issued prescriptions to hundreds of people a day. There were doctors putting a lot of this stuff out on the street, Hughes said. There were long lines. This form of marketing the drug to a drug-addicted people, I don't think that had been done before. So we will start with Smack Clans in the Sanctuary, page 148, on a different day. Hope you're enjoying the book, guys.